They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I served mine at exactly 9:03 a.m. on a Monday morning with a visitor badge and a security escort. It was, if I do say so myself, Michelin star worthy. But let's back up. Every good implosion has a catalyst, a ground zero. Mine started the Friday before, but the real story, the one that matters, began 3 years ago. I was Maya Chen, the invisible genius behind TechFlow Dynamics' biggest breakthrough. I coded an AI algorithm, a beautiful, elegant piece of work I called Prometheus, that was set to revolutionize data processing. Think of it as the difference between using an abacus and a quantum computer. For 3 years, I lived on lukewarm coffee and the glow of my monitors. 18-hour days were the norm. I slept on a sad little cot in the server room more often than in my own bed. My beat-up Honda in the parking lot was more of a landmark than a vehicle. I sacrificed friendships, dating, and any semblance of a life, all for the dangling carrot of a promotion my boss, Richard Blackstone, assured me was definitely coming. Friday afternoon, something came, but it wasn't a promotion. It was a termination letter citing redundancy. Redundancy. I, the architect of the company's entire future, was redundant. Blackstone, a man whose primary technical skill was figuring out how to unmute himself on Zoom, delivered the news with the smarmy, condescending pity of a crocodile mourning its lunch. He droned on about dead weight and streamlining for efficiency. All I heard was the wah 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 of a Peanuts cartoon teacher. A burly security guard, whose name was probably Chet, escorted me out like I was a common criminal, my box of sad desk plants and a half-eaten bag of pretzels in my arms, the final humiliation. My badge, the key card I'd swiped at 3 a.m. more times than I could count, blinked a pathetic red. Access denied. By 5 p.m., I was sitting in my Honda across the street, watching the main conference room light up. And there he was, Richard Blackstone, my former boss, presenting my algorithm to a room full of eager investors. He'd even stolen the name, Prometheus. I could practically see the drool from across the street as he secured a $50 million funding round based on the code I wrote in my grandmother's garage during unpaid overtime, the algorithm that was about to make him very, very rich. What Blackstone didn't know, what no one at TechFlow knew, was that Maya Chen, the quiet coder in the thrift store hoodie, wasn't just some girl. I was the secret heir to the Chen technology empire. I'd hidden my identity behind a mountain of student loan debt and a wardrobe that screamed, I might have a cat, all to prove I could make it on my own merits. He thought he'd fired a redundant programmer. He was about to find out he'd kicked a sleeping dragon. It's just business, Maya, nothing personal. Richard Blackstone's voice was slick with false sincerity. He leaned back in his Herman Miller chair, a picture of unearned authority. His tie was probably worth more than my car. He steepled his fingers, a gesture I'm sure he practiced in the mirror to look thoughtful and important. It just made him look like a Bond villain's less successful younger brother. Redundancy? I echoed, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Richard, Prometheus is set to launch in 2 weeks. The core of it is my work. The entirety of it is my work. How can I possibly be redundant? We're moving in a new direction, he said, the phrase a meaningless corporate platitude. We appreciate your contributions, of course, but the team is streamlining. We need to cut the dead weight to be more agile. Dead weight? The phrase hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I glanced past him, through the glass walls of his office. My colleagues, the people I'd shared pizza with at midnight, the ones who'd borrowed my code snippets and my brain power were staring. Some looked shocked. A few looked away, suddenly fascinated by their keyboards. Their faces were a gallery of pity and fear. They knew it was wrong, but they also knew it could have been them. Survival is a powerful instinct. You can't be serious, I whispered, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. I am. He slid a crisp white envelope across the polished desk. My severance. Security will escort you out. Please be quick about it. We don't want to cause a scene. A scene? As if I was the one causing it. A large man in a tight-fitting blazer, the aforementioned Chet, materialized at the door. He didn't look at me, just stared at a point on the wall behind my head. I was no longer a person. I was a package to be delivered to the curb. I didn't say another word. What was there to say? I numbly walked back to my desk, Chet trailing me like a shadow. People I'd known for years wouldn't meet my eyes. Sarah, my only real friend in the office, had tears welling in hers. She mouthed, "I'm so sorry," but I just gave a tiny, defeated shake of my head. I packed my box. A framed photo of my grandmother, a ridiculously oversized mug that said, "You don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps." A collection of programming books with cracked spines, and the sad, wilting succulent I'd named Steve. It felt like packing up a life that had never really been mine. At the main entrance, I held my badge to the scanner out of pure pathetic habit. The light flashed red. The lock clicked with an air of finality. Access denied. That was it. 3 years of my life revoked in an instant. Chet grunted and pushed the door open for me. He didn't even wish me well. I made it to my beat-up Honda, the engine sputtering to life like it was as tired as I was. I just sat there, clutching the steering wheel, the box of my failed career sitting on the passenger seat. I watched the sleek, modern glass building where I'd given everything, where I'd poured my soul into lines of code. It looked alien now, a monument to my own stupidity. I had believed in meritocracy. I had believed hard work would be rewarded. I was such a fool. The drive home was a blur. My apartment, a cramped one-bedroom that always smelled faintly of my neighbor's curry, felt hollow. I dropped the box on the floor, kicked off my worn-out sneakers, and collapsed onto the lumpy sofa. The silence was deafening. No humming servers, no frantic keyboard clicks, just the sound of my own breathing and the distant wail of a siren. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, a sharp, insistent knock echoed through the apartment. I groaned. Expecting it to be the landlord chasing me about the rent I was now definitely not going to be able to pay. I dragged myself to the door and peered through the peephole. Two figures in dark, impeccably tailored suits stood in the hallway. They looked so out of place in my dingy building they might as well have been wearing space helmets. I cautiously opened the door a crack. "Maya Chen?" the older of the two men asked. He had silver hair and eyes that seemed to analyze every crack in my wall. "Who's asking?" I said, my voice hoarse. "My name is Arthur Wembley. This is my associate, Mr. Davis. We were your grandmother's legal counsel." My blood ran cold. "Were?" He nodded gravely. "I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, Miss Chen. Your grandmother, Eleanor, passed away peacefully 2 days ago." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Grandma Eleanor, the woman who had taught me how to solder a circuit board when I was 10, who had funded my education, who had been my rock, my only family. I hadn't spoken to her in a week, too busy chasing Blackstone's empty promises. A wave of guilt and grief so powerful it buckled my knees washed over me. "We've been trying to reach you," Mr. Wembley continued gently. "There are matters to discuss. The reading of her will." An hour later, I was sitting in a sterile, mahogany-paneled office that smelled of old books and money. Mr. Wembley read the document in a low, steady voice. It was mostly legal jargon that went straight over my head until he got to the final section. "And the entirety of my estate, including all controlling shares in Chen Technology and its subsidiaries, I leave to my beloved granddaughter, Maya Chen." He paused, looking at me over his glasses. "The current estimated value of the conglomerate is approximately $2.8 billion. I just stared at him. It didn't compute. Billion, with a B. It was a number so large it felt fictional. I don't understand," I stammered. "Your grandmother built an empire, Miss Chen." Mr. Davis, the silent associate, finally spoke. "She believed you had the talent to surpass her, but she also worried—" Mr. Wembley slid a small, sealed envelope across the table. My name was written on the front in my grandmother's elegant, familiar script. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Maya, if you are reading this, then my time is done. I know you never understood why I let you struggle, why I watched you take out student loans and work thankless jobs. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I needed you to understand the world without the shield of my name. I needed you to see people for who they truly are, not for how they act when they want something from you. You have my mind, my passion. But you also have my heart, which is a tender thing in a world full of wolves. I worry that you believe kindness is enough. It is not. Power without humility is worthless, but humility without power is helpless. You are not helpless, my love. Never again. Go and build something worthy of your name. And don't be afraid to break the things that stand in your way. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. Tears streamed down my face, blurring the words. I clutched the letter to my chest. She knew. She had known all along what I would face. She hadn't abandoned me. She had been training me. I thought of Blackstone's smug face. I thought of my work being stolen. I thought of the red light on the badge reader. Humility without power is helpless. A new feeling began to smolder beneath the grief and the shock. It was cold and sharp, and it burned with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. It was rage. Pure, unadulterated, and now very, very well-funded. I looked up at the two lawyers, my eyes hard. "Mr. Wembley," I said, my voice steady for the first time all day. "I need you to tell me everything there is to know about acquiring a mid-sized tech company, specifically one called TechFlow Dynamics." It was time to stop being helpless. The transformation from Maya Chen, broke coder, to M. Chen, private investor, was dizzyingly fast. The first thing to go was the thrift store wardrobe. Mr. Wembley's team dispatched a personal stylist who looked at my collection of faded hoodies with an expression of profound sorrow. Within hours, my closet was filled with clothes that cost more than my annual salary. Sharp blazers, silk blouses, shoes with heels that made a satisfying, intimidating click on polished floors. Next came the car. The beat-up Honda was retired to a climate-controlled garage like a cherished museum piece. Its replacement was a sleek black Audi e-tron, silent and deadly. It felt less like driving and more like piloting a stealth fighter. But the new clothes and the fancy car were just props. The real change was happening behind the scenes. My grandmother's business team, a group of men and women who moved with the quiet confidence of apex predators, became my personal war council. They were sharks, and when I told them what had happened, they smelled blood in the water. "TechFlow Dynamics," said a man named Marcus, their head of acquisitions, as he pulled up the company's profile on a massive screen in the boardroom. "Small fish, but noisy. That $50 million funding round made some waves." "It was funded on a lie," I said, sipping an espresso that was so good it felt like a religious experience. "The best lies often are," Marcus grinned, "but lies have short shelf lives." For the next week, we dove into TechFlow, and what we found was glorious. Blackstone wasn't just a thief, he was an idiot. Despite the influx of cash from the stolen Prometheus algorithm, the company was hemorrhaging money. He'd been cooking the books for years, embezzling funds for a lifestyle he clearly couldn't afford. Lavish trips, expensive art, a mistress with a taste for diamonds. He was a cliché with a corner office. The company was maybe 3 months from imploding on its own. The $50 million was just a temporary plug in a dam that was about to burst. Worse for him was the pattern of behavior. I wasn't his first victim. We uncovered a trail of other employees, mostly young women, whose ideas and projects had been mysteriously shelved, only to reappear later under his name. He was a serial idea kleptomaniac. My team was ruthless. They were financial assassins, and they were having the time of their lives. "He's leveraged up to his eyeballs," a forensic accountant named Lena reported with glee. He took out a massive personal loan against his shares to fund the down payment on a mansion in the Hamptons. If the stock price dips even slightly, he'll get a margin call that will wipe him out. "Then let's give it a little nudge, shall we?" I said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. This was better than I could have ever imagined. My new life as M. Chen was surprisingly easy to slip into. Money, it turns out, is a universal passport. It gets you into rooms and conversations you could never access otherwise. My first move was to arrange a series of coincidental meetings. I had lunch at the ridiculously expensive downtown club where TechFlow's primary investors like to congregate. I let my name be dropped, the Chen name. It worked like magic. Suddenly, I was the most interesting person in the room. M. Chen, One of them, a portly man named Henderson, puffed as he approached my table. I heard you were back in the city. Your grandmother was a legend. She was one of a kind, I said, my voice cool and measured. I'm just here looking for opportunities, interesting new technologies. Ah, like TechFlow's Prometheus. Revolutionary stuff. Richard Blackstone is a visionary. I took a delicate sip of my water. Is he? I'd heard there were some questions about the algorithm's origins and their financials. A bit aggressive for my taste. High burn rate, risky. I didn't need to say more, I just planted the seed. A tiny, poisonous seed of doubt. I did the same with two other major investors. I wasn't accusing, just expressing concern, like a fellow member of the ridiculously rich club looking out for her peers. And while I was playing social butterfly, my team was playing financial shark. We set up a shell company, a bland, anonymous entity named North Star Holdings. Through North Star, we began quietly buying up TechFlow's debt from its lenders at a discount. Blackstone had no idea that his company's fate was slowly being transferred into my hands. The next piece of the puzzle was Sarah. I called her, and we met at a quiet, out-of-the-way coffee shop. She looked stressed, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. Maya, oh my God, she said, hugging me tightly. What he did to you is monstrous. The whole office is walking on eggshells. He's become a complete tyrant. I can imagine, I said, stirring my latte. Sarah, I need to know everything. The mood in the office, what he's saying, who he's meeting with. Why? She asked, her brow furrowed with worry. What are you planning? I leaned forward. I'm planning on getting my work back, and I need your help. She hesitated for only a second. Anything. That man has been stealing from people for years. I was next on his list, I think. He was asking about my work on the data compression module. Then she dropped the first bombshell, the twist I never saw coming. It's worse than you think, Maya, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She slid a USB stick across the table. I've been keeping a record for months. Every meeting he took credit for, every idea he stole. I have emails, documents, even a few audio recordings of him boasting about it. I was going to go to the board, but I was scared. I stared at the small piece of plastic. It was a goddamn treasure chest. Sarah wasn't just a victim in waiting. She was a secret archivist of Blackstone's corruption. Sarah, I said, my voice thick with emotion, you have no idea what you've just done. Oh, I think I do, she said, a small, defiant smile playing on her lips. I think I'm helping you burn him to the ground. With Sarah's USB stick, the game changed. We didn't just have suspicions, we had proof. My legal team went through the files with the precision of diamond cutters, building an ironclad case. But I didn't want to just sue him. That was too simple, too clean. I wanted to dismantle his entire world, piece by piece, just like he had tried to do to mine. The plan was a masterclass in corporate sabotage orchestrated by Marcus and his team of sharks. Step 1. Squeeze the finances. We used the information about the company's precarious position to create a cash flow crisis. A few strategically placed calls from concerned investors, my new friends, to the banks holding TechFlow's credit lines were all it took. Suddenly, credit was tightened. Payments were demanded up front. Blackstone's house of cards started to wobble. Step 2. Create a desperate need. With the company suddenly gasping for air, they would need a savior, a white knight investor to swoop in with a fresh injection of cash. And who better to play that role than my anonymous little shell company, North Star Holdings? Step 3. Isolate the king. We timed our final move perfectly. Marcus, through his network of spies, seriously, the man knew everyone, found out Blackstone was planning a weekend trip to the Cayman Islands. A little victory tour, no doubt. While he was sipping pina coladas and congratulating himself on his genius, we would make our move. We scheduled an emergency board meeting for Monday morning to discuss the sudden and catastrophic financial crisis. As we were finalizing the details, Lena, the forensic accountant, called me into the war room. She looked pale. We found something else, she said, pointing to a series of encrypted transactions from a TechFlow account to an offshore entity. This isn't just embezzlement. It took her team of crypto analysts 6 hours to break it. The truth was colder and uglier than I imagined. He's not just a thief, Maya, Lena said, her voice grim. He's a traitor. He's been selling company secrets, specifically early schematics and data from the Prometheus project. To who? I asked, my stomach twisting into a knot. She typed a few commands and a name appeared on the screen. Innovatech Solutions, TechFlow's biggest and most ruthless competitor. This was the second twist, a knife in the gut. He hadn't just stolen my work to get rich. He had betrayed the entire company, every employee, every investor, for a payday on the side. My personal vendetta had just intersected with major corporate espionage. The trap was set, the bait was laid, and Richard Blackstone, tanned and relaxed from his island getaway, was about to walk right into it. Monday morning couldn't come soon enough. I arrived at TechFlow Dynamics at 8:45 a.m. I wasn't wearing a thrift store hoodie. I was in a razor-sharp, dark navy suit that probably cost more than the entire contents of my old apartment. My heels made an authoritative, rhythmic click on the polished marble floor of the lobby. The receptionist, a young woman who had always been kind to me, looked up, her eyes widening in confusion. "Maya, what are you doing here?" "I have a meeting," I said with a serene smile. "An emergency board meeting, in fact." Before she could process that, the elevator doors opened and my team swept in. Arthur Wembley, Marcus, Lena, and two very large, very serious-looking men who were definitely not lawyers. We bypassed the reception desk and headed straight for the executive floor. We were setting up in the main conference room, the same room where I'd watched Blackstone sell my soul for $50 million, when he finally arrived, strolling in at 9:02 a.m., looking tanned, rested, and utterly oblivious. He was mid-laugh, telling some joke to his sycophantic CFO. He stopped dead when he saw me standing at the head of the table. "Maya?" His face cycled through a series of emotions. Confusion, then irritation, then outright anger. "What the hell are you doing here? I thought I had you removed. Security." "They work for me now, Richard," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the silent room. His eyes darted around, landing on the stony faces of my team, the impassive board members already seated and the two large men guarding the door. The color drained from his face. "What is this? What's going on?" I picked up a thin plastic card from the table, a visitor badge. I walked around the table and held it out to him. "This is an emergency board meeting, Richard. We've been discussing the company's performance issues, its massive debt, its imminent bankruptcy, and a rather shocking case of corporate espionage." His jaw worked, but no sound came out. He stared at the visitor badge in my hand as if it were a venomous snake. "North Star Holdings," I continued, savoring every word, "has acquired a controlling interest in TechFlow Dynamics. As the sole owner of North Star, that makes me the new majority shareholder. And my first act as owner is to address the leadership problem." The realization finally dawned in his eyes, a flicker of pure, unadulterated horror. He knew. "You," he whispered, the single word choked with disbelief. "The loans, the investors, that was you?" "It was," I said, my smile not reaching my eyes. "They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I prefer to serve mine at exactly 9:03 a.m. on a Monday morning." I pushed the visitor badge into his hand. "You're fired, Richard, effective immediately." For a moment, I thought he was going to lunge at me. His face was a mask of crimson rage, but then he just seemed to deflate. The bluster, the arrogance, all of it evaporated, leaving behind a pathetic, terrified little man. "Security," I said, nodding to my two large associates. "We'll escort you to your car. Please be quick about it. We don't want to cause a scene." The words, his own words, hung in the air. He didn't even pack a box. With Blackstone gone, a strange calm settled over the office, the kind of quiet that follows a massive storm. But the real work was just beginning. We weren't just here for a corporate takeover. We were here for an excavation. Lena and her team of forensic accountants descended on Blackstone's office like a swarm of locusts, and what they unearthed was a cesspool of corruption. The stolen algorithm was just the tip of the iceberg. The man had been systematically targeting female employees for years. We found project proposals, research notes, and innovative concepts from at least 4 other women, all locked away in a hidden file on his server, labeled ideas. Each one corresponded to a project he had later claimed as his own. One of the victims was a brilliant engineer named Chloe, who had proposed a groundbreaking data encryption method. Blackstone had told her it was unfeasible and shelved the project. 3 months later, he'd secured a patent for it in his name. When she confronted him, he'd launched a campaign of gaslighting and professional sabotage that drove her to have a nervous breakdown. She'd quit the industry entirely. I found her. I called her personally. Hearing her story, the way her voice trembled as she recounted the humiliation and self-doubt, solidified my resolve. This was bigger than my own stolen code. This was about justice for all of them. One by one, the other victims came forward, emboldened by the news of Blackstone's firing. Their stories painted a sickening portrait of a predator who fed on the talent and ambition of the women around him. But the web was even more tangled and venomous than I knew. As we dug into the payments from Innovatech for the stolen Prometheus data, we found the trail didn't end in Blackstone's offshore account. It was a pass-through. The bulk of the money was being funneled to another entity. "We have a name," Marcus said, walking into my new office. Blackstone's old office, which I'd had professionally exercised and redecorated, with a grim look on his face. He handed me a tablet. On the screen was the name of the ultimate beneficiary, a name I knew all too well, Jan Lee, my uncle, my mother's brother. The third twist hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. My Uncle John had always been the black sheep of the family, resentful of my grandmother's success, and the fact that she had chosen me, her granddaughter, as her heir instead of him. He saw the Chen Empire as his birthright. This was never just about Richard Blackstone being a greedy, misogynistic thief. Blackstone was a pawn, a useful idiot in a much larger, more sinister game. The theft of my algorithm, the attempt to ruin my career before it even began, it was all orchestrated by my own family. My uncle had been trying to discredit me, to make me look incompetent and unworthy so he could challenge my position and wrestle control of the Chen Empire for himself. My personal quest for revenge had stumbled into a declaration of war. I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. Men like my uncle and Blackstone don't just slink away into the night. They fight back, and they fight dirty. The first salvo came in the form of a lawsuit. Blackstone, funded by my uncle's deep pockets, sued me for wrongful termination. It was a laughable claim, but it was designed to be a public spectacle. The media, smelling a juicy story, pounced. The headlines were brutal. "Spoiled heiress in petty revenge plot," screamed one tabloid. "Tech billionaire plays corporate raider to settle grudge," read a more respectable financial paper. Blackstone went on a media tour, painting himself as the victim of a vindictive, unstable young woman who couldn't handle rejection. He was a master of spin, twisting my righteous anger into a narrative of a childish tantrum. Then my Uncle Gene surfaced. He gave an exclusive interview to Forbes, his face a carefully constructed mask of concern. "I love my niece," he said, oozing false sincerity. "But she is young. She is emotional. To take over a company for such personal reasons, it shows a lack of judgment. It calls into question her fitness to run the Chen family business. An empire requires a steady hand, not a clenched fist." He was trying to use my own actions against me, to prove his point that I was unworthy. It was a brilliant, vicious move. My own team started to look at me with a sliver of doubt in their eyes. Had I let my anger cloud my judgment? The pressure was immense. I was fighting a war on two fronts, one for the soul of TechFlow and another for my own family's legacy. I felt a flicker of the old helplessness return. That evening, I was alone in the boardroom, staring at the city lights, when Arthur Wembley came in. He held a small, ornate wooden box. "I was instructed to give this to you if and only if your uncle made a public move against you," he said, his voice soft. My heart hammered in my chest. "Grandma." I opened the box. Inside was a single encrypted hard drive and a note in her handwriting. Jan was always impatient. He confuses ambition with character. I had hoped he would learn, but I prepared for the worst. "This is my insurance policy. Use it wisely, my love. Remember, a queen protects her kingdom no matter who the enemy is." This was the fourth twist. My grandmother, ever the Grand Master, had anticipated this betrayal. She had been 1, 2, even 3 steps ahead of my uncle. Lena plugged the drive into her system. It took less than a minute to decrypt. On the screen, a web of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and illegal transactions appeared. It was a detailed, undeniable record of my uncle Jian embezzling millions from the Chen Empire for over a decade. He had tried to paint me as unfit. My grandmother had just handed me the brush to paint him as a common criminal. Staring at the evidence of my uncle's betrayal, everything clicked into place. The pieces of the puzzle rearranged themselves into a new, terrifying picture. The theft of my algorithm wasn't random. Blackstone hadn't chosen me as a victim just because I was convenient. My uncle must have known about my anonymous job at TechFlow. He'd probably pointed Blackstone in my direction, whispering in his ear about a brilliant but naive coder ripe for the picking. It was the perfect setup. Blackstone gets a revolutionary algorithm and a massive payday. My uncle gets to see me publicly humiliated and professionally discredited, proving I was unworthy of my inheritance. Blackstone was just the gun. My uncle had pulled the trigger. The realization left a bitter taste in my mouth. My quest for justice against a misogynistic boss had morphed into a sordid family drama. I now had a choice. I could release the information on the hard drive, expose my uncle, and win the public relations war. It would be a brutal public execution of his character, the perfect revenge. Or was there another way? What would my grandmother have wanted? A queen protects her kingdom. Was my kingdom just the company? Or was it the family name, the legacy she had spent her life building? A public feud would tarnish that legacy forever. I was wrestling with this impossible choice when Sarah called. Her voice was urgent. "Maya, can you meet? Now? It's important, and come alone." We met on a bench in a quiet park downtown. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. Sarah looked different. The nervous energy was gone, replaced by a steely calm I'd never seen before. "I haven't been entirely honest with you, Maya," she began, not meeting my eye. She pulled out a wallet and flipped it open. Inside, nestled behind a driver's license, was a gold badge. "Special Agent Sarah Jenkins, FBI Cybercrime and Corporate Espionage Division." I stared, speechless. My brain felt like it was short-circuiting. My friend, the quiet coder who shared lunch with me and complained about Blackstone, was a Fed. This was the fifth twist, and it was a reality-warping stunner. "What?" was all I could manage. "We've been investigating Innovatech for 2 years," she explained, her voice all business. "We knew they were aggressively poaching secrets, but we could never get inside their pipeline. Then we got a tip about Blackstone. I was assigned to go undercover at TechFlow to see if he was their source." My mind reeled. "So, you knew he was going to steal my algorithm?" She finally looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "I knew he was stealing, yes. I didn't know the specifics of Prometheus until it was too late. I couldn't blow my cover, Maya. I'm sorry. When he fired you, I thought the whole operation was shot. But then, you bought the company." A small, wry smile touched her lips. "No one in the bureau saw that coming. You didn't just walk into the perfect position to help us, Maya. You built the damn position yourself." She explained that their investigation wasn't just about Blackstone or Innovatech. It was part of a much larger case, a massive corporate conspiracy involving dozens of companies and some very powerful players. And my uncle Gian, it turned out, was a key figure they'd been trying to nail for years. I had thought I was the main character in a revenge story. It turned out I was a supporting player in a federal investigation. Suddenly, the path forward was crystal clear. This was no longer about personal revenge versus family legacy. It was about law and order. It was about justice, real justice, on a scale I couldn't have imagined. My grandmother's final lesson clicked into place. Justice is infinitely more powerful than revenge. I gave Agent Jenkins, Sarah, everything. The hard drive from my grandmother, our own internal investigation files, the testimony from the other women Blackstone had victimized. The FBI now had an airtight case that connected Blackstone, Innovatech, and my uncle Gian in a neat, undeniable chain of corruption. Faced with decades in federal prison for corporate espionage, Richard Blackstone crumbled. He sang like a canary. He agreed to testify against my uncle in exchange for a reduced sentence. The courtroom was cold and imposing. I sat in the front row, watching my uncle at the defendant's table. He looked small and diminished, the smug confidence replaced by a sallow, fearful pallor. When he saw me, his eyes burned with a pathetic, desperate hatred. Blackstone took the stand and laid it all out. The meetings with Gian, the plan to use me, the selling of secrets. It was a sordid, pathetic tale of greed and jealousy. When it was my turn to give a victim impact statement, I didn't look at Blackstone. I looked directly at my uncle. "You sought to prove I was unworthy of my grandmother's legacy," I said, my voice clear and strong. "But you fundamentally misunderstood what that legacy is. It isn't about money or power. It's about innovation. It's about integrity. It's about building things that last. You didn't just try to steal my inheritance. You tried to poison the very values she stood for. And for that, you are the one who is unworthy." He was found guilty on all counts. As they led him away, I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just a quiet, somber sense of closure. Later that week, Arthur Wembley sat with me in my office. He had a strange, wistful look on his face. "You know," he said, "I think your grandmother knew this would happen. All of it." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "The will, leaving you everything. Your anonymous job. It was all so specific. She always said you had to be forged in fire. I think she knew about Jan's conspiracy. I think she knew the only person with the heart and the mind to stop him, to protect the company and its integrity, was you. She didn't just leave you a fortune, Maya. She put you on the board, at the right time, at the right place. She orchestrated your entire humble career to position you to be the hero of this story." The sixth and final twist. It wasn't destiny, it was a plan. A breathtaking, high-stakes, posthumous gambit from the greatest strategic mind I had ever known. My grandmother hadn't just left me a letter. She had left me a mission, and I had completed it. With the legal battles over and the dust settled, the real work began. Transforming tech flow dynamics from a toxic playground for a mediocre tyrant into a company that lived up to the name I had given my algorithm, a place that brought light. My first act was to implement a radical new policy, the Prometheus Pact. We established a generous profit-sharing plan, ensuring that every employee, from the janitor to the lead engineers, would benefit from the company's success. We instituted ironclad anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policies with a clear, anonymous reporting structure that went to an independent third party. Mental health support became a priority, with free counseling services and mandated unplugged vacation time. I personally promoted every woman Blackstone had stolen from, giving them the titles, resources, and public credit they had been denied. Chloe, the engineer who'd had a breakdown, agreed to come back as the new head of research and development. Her first project was her unfeasible encryption method, which we fast-tracked with a massive budget. Colleagues like Sarah, well, the real Sarah, who had been my friend, not the FBI version, who had stood by me or shown quiet support, were rewarded. Those who had been complicit in Blackstone's culture of fear were given a simple choice: adapt to the new way or find the door. Most chose to adapt. A culture of fear had been replaced by one of respect. In the midst of all this rebuilding, my personal life threw one last, unexpected curveball. During the height of the investigation, I had leaned heavily on one of the FBI agents on Sarah's team, a kind, sharp, and surprisingly funny man named Ben. Amidst the chaos of depositions and evidence logs, we'd found a strange sort of comfort in each other's company. We had a brief, intense relationship that we both knew was probably a bad idea, and it ended as amicably as it began when the case wrapped up. Until, 2 months later, I found myself staring at a positive pregnancy test in the bathroom of my new, ridiculously large corner office. That was the seventh twist, the one that had nothing to do with business or revenge. I was going to be a mother. I called Ben. He was shocked, then thrilled. We were a mess, two people thrown together by circumstance, but we were going to figure it out. Suddenly, building a better company wasn't just a professional goal. It was a personal imperative. I was building a world I wanted my child to live in. 1 year later, I stood in that same conference room at the head of the same long, polished table. But this time, I was addressing a room full of bright-eyed new hires. "Here at TechFlow, we have one core principle," I said, looking at each of them. "Your ideas have value. Your voice matters. We don't reward the loudest person in the room. We reward the best idea, no matter who it comes from. Integrity isn't just a word on a poster here, it's the basis of everything we do. After the orientation, my assistant buzzed me. Maya, there's a Richard Blackstone here to see you. He has an appointment for a junior programmer interview. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. I had been expecting this. After his testimony, Blackstone had served a short sentence and was now out, blacklisted from every executive position in the industry. I had him shown in. He looked smaller. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by an ill-fitting one he'd clearly bought off the rack. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, weary humility. He couldn't even meet my eyes. Maya, Miss Chen, he stammered. I don't expect, I just need a job. I know how to code. I'm good at it. It's all I have left. This was the final test. I could have him thrown out. I could savor the moment, the ultimate reversal of fortune. The old me, the me from a year ago would have. But I wasn't that person anymore. The technical interview is with Chloe in R&D, I said calmly. If she says you have the skills, the job is yours. But Richard, I leaned forward, my voice firm but not unkind. You will have no authority. You will be part of a team. You will be judged solely on the quality of your work and your character. One strike, and you're gone. Understand? Tears welled in his eyes. He just nodded, unable to speak. This was the eighth and final twist, the one I wrote myself. I hired him, not for revenge, not to lord my power over him, but because my grandmother's true lesson wasn't just about power or justice. It was about redemption. It was about the belief that everyone, even the man who tried to destroy you, deserves a second chance to be better. Later that day, I walked back into my office. On the wall, in a simple, elegant frame, hung the visitor badge I had given Blackstone on that first Monday morning. Beneath it, a small brass plaque was inscribed with a simple sentence: "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are." 5 years later, TechFlow Dynamics, rebranded simply as Prometheus, was the gold standard for ethical and innovative business practices. Our profit-sharing model had been copied by dozens of other companies. Our workplace culture was the subject of Harvard Business School case studies. We weren't just profitable, we were changing the world for the better, one line of code at a time. My daughter Eleanor had my grandmother's fiery eyes and Ben's easy smile. She was 5 years old and already learning to write simple Python scripts on a small laptop in the garage of our home. The same garage where I, heartbroken and furious, had once poured my soul into the algorithm that started it all. Richard Blackstone became one of our most dedicated employees. He never sought a promotion. He found a quiet satisfaction in just doing the work, in being part of a team. He started mentoring young coders, advocating fiercely for ethical workplace practices. He was a man transformed, a testament to the power of a second chance. I often thought about my grandmother's wisdom. I had started this journey wanting revenge, a simple, satisfying eye for an eye. But she had known better. True power isn't about crushing your enemies. It's not about winning. It's about transformation. It's about taking the broken pieces of your life and building something stronger and more beautiful in its place. One sunny afternoon, I found Eleanor in the garage, showing another kid from the neighborhood how to debug a piece of code. "See?" she said, her little face serious with concentration. "It doesn't work because you're trying to take all the credit. You have to share it. Then you both get to the next level." I smiled. The legacy was in safe hands. Sometimes the best way to win is to help others win, too.